So I got this Tamiya Dynahead for Christmas. It was a truck that I was looking forward to getting and putting together. Everything was nicely packaged, and they even sent with it a little bit of extra cardboard in here, which I don't know what the hell I would use this for. These are the highly sought after portals. Here's some more stuff. Looks like steering stuff. More stuff. Gears. Looks like body mounts. And the big bag of hardware. This Lexan body looks like it'd be really fun to modify, and I'll probably customize it. Instructions that probably need to be followed to a T, maybe. With these stickers, color choices are going to be very limited as far as being creative with my color choices. So I marked the letter of the sprue on the bag so that way I can easily identify them. I mean, these bags are marked, so why not? So the first step that they have us doing is cutting these sprues off of here and putting some goop on these little mounts for the suspension. I have no idea why they have us put this goop on here. I think it's to keep it waterproof, but I would have rather have seen it like glued in there. Now these A-arm halves are directional, and the marks kind of need to line up in order for them to be put together correctly, which I'm glad that they did that, because I could probably mess this up pretty easily. Be sure to lube up the pivot shaft so that way the arm moves freely. So laying these parts out on video not only looks cool, but it helps keep me organized as far as putting these together. That way I know I have all the parts that I need and that all the parts actually get into the assembly. I was really surprised that there wasn't any grease to put on these gears right here, but all that gets put in there is a little wad of rubbery, gooey plastic stuff. So this stuff gets cut off at 5 millimeters and then wound up into a ball, or wadded up into a ball. And then each differential gets 3 of them. And we just have to add the other bevel gear, the washer, and then cap it off. After that one, I just have to do 2 more, and we'll be able to put them in the case. So I don't know why I'm messing around with this hand screwdriver when I have a power screwdriver right next to me. So here I'm using the ball bearings instead of the brass bushings that they sent along. I figured that this would be a good upgrade to do during the build, so that way I didn't have to tear it all apart just to put those bearings in. I still greased everything up with the silicone grease that they sent along with it. So this is when I added the 3 big differentials. And then after that I went ahead and added the other gears. Some of these gears need bearings pressed into them or pushed into them, and it never ceases to amaze me that the bearings are always a little bit loose in there. You would think that you would want them kind of snug so that way it forced the ball bearings to actually work. So there's a lot of idler gears that go into this, and the shafts that I'm placing right now are for those idler gears. Some of them are hollow and some of them are solid, so you gotta kind of pay attention to which ones go where. And I just put a dab of grease on all of them. Even though the shaft probably won't turn on the inside of those bearings, there's a possibility that it could. So I just put a little bit of grease on there for a little bit of added protection, and then I put the rest of it all together. I make sure I dab a little bit of grease on the gears so that way they roll a little bit smoother and a little bit less wear. These two halves going together are nowhere near watertight. There's lots of small areas where water could get in there, and I see a lot of videos where people are running them through water and stuff, and I just kind of want to know how long that transmission will last doing that. But then again, if I'm not worried about it, I just won't run it through water, but I would like to have a little bit of fun with it. So I mean, take a look at this gasket right here. That's no way going to seal up that motor, let alone the transmission. You got to just make sure the grub screw gets put on that flat of that shaft and then snug it up and remeasure it. I actually had to do this a few times. Getting these holes to line up with the motor was something else to get those screws all the way through. It took a little bit of doing, but I eventually was able to accomplish the task. Now you got to be super careful when you're running this electric screwdriver in plastic, because there's a pretty good chance that you could either strip out the plastic or, you know, you round out the head of the screw. Now these arms have a mark on them that need to be lined up, and you'll know if you have it on backwards or not. The big thing is just to make sure that these pivot points are greased up, and everything will usually slide together fairly easily. I had a little bit of trouble here because there was a little bit of binding, but for the most part this all went together fairly easily. I mean, even on the screw that holds this upper arm, I put a little bit of grease on. So these portals are pretty cool. Not only do they drop the gear ratio, they also drop the axle, which gives a little bit more ground clearance. Now I'm using front and rear wheel steering for this, so I have to use 2 of the steering, or I should say 4 of the steering gearboxes, and then there's 2 different ones for the center axle. The aftermarket bearing kit that I got for this car only comes with the bearings for some of the larger shafts. Those smaller brass gears still need to use the brass bushings. So that's why 2 of them are brass and the other 2 are the ball bearings. Running all 6 of these screws was super tedious because not only did I have 6 screws in each one of these portals, but I had 6 portals to do. So a total of 36, I guess. Now this thing uses friction shocks and these little rubber tubes. That's what causes the friction. The head of this screw rubs on the inside of that rubber tube, and that's what gives it the dampening resistance. Now, I measured this quite a few times, and I was seriously confused after I assembled the shock and put the spring on it. The spring just seemed a little loose, and it was almost like the spring should have been longer, because the way I assembled it was correct, and I checked it 3 or 4 times, and it just seemed like the spring was wrong. So I don't know if this is something that Tamiya did incorrectly or overlooked, or maybe they went with a different vendor with the spring, but I had to make some spacers to put in there with my 3D printer in order for it to work out right.